Hi, everybody. I'm Ani Anderson from Motivation Beyond Measure. I am super excited to be here for our last Inner Game of Motivation talk with Ann Lynch today about sleep and stress decompression. I've been really looking forward to this conversation about sleep because our graduates are using cross mapping in all kinds of interesting ways. I haven't heard Ann's stories about sleep yet, but it's something that so many people struggle with, and it's kind of complex, right? It's one of those things that there's deeper meanings and things that are going on when people aren't sleeping well. Why aren't they creating the habits? Why can't they fall asleep? Why can't they stay asleep? There's so much that goes into it. So I'm really excited about today's conversation. Before we hop into it, we're talking about inner game of motivation because we are firm believers here at Motivation Beyond Measure that things are really moving from a place where leaders, doctors, therapists, coaches, managers, there's less of an efficacy with trying to motivate people externally. I mean, what we know, you can tell people if you want, but the secret is that all there is internal motivation. That's all there really is. So how do we help people tap into their inner motivation? And one of the greatest ways to do that is through a methodology that we use called cross mapping. So we'll talk a little bit about cross mapping. But before we do, I want you to know that everybody is motivated. So we talk about how everybody has motivation. Motivation is your reason for moving. Everybody moves, everybody has motivation. People might not like their motivation. You might not like somebody else's motivation, but heck, there is motivation there. And that helps us to have a very different kind of conversation with people when we enter into the conversation knowing that everybody is motivated. So speaking of motivation, I'm really excited to introduce our SBMC, Sensation-Based Motivation Coaching graduate, Ann Lynch. She is the creator and founder of Shine Your Light Healing and Yoga. And Ann, I'm so excited that you're here today.
Thank you, Ani. I am equally as excited. And thanks for having me. I feel very honored and blessed to be part of this community and part of your motivation inner peace, what did you call it? Inner
Game of Motivation series.
Very profound, right? The work that you're doing and the work that we're doing as well. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, we've had a lot of really great conversations with this series, and I'm really excited to highlight your experience, Ann, because you entered into coaching from a place of being a yoga instructor first, right? So you have taught lots and lots of yoga classes and you added coaching in. So I think that's a really unique vantage point to add on coaching because you're already as a yoga instructor working with people's bodies. So I'm interested to know, as a yoga instructor, do people ask you a lot of questions about their health and wellness? Because I would imagine that you're a little bit like the bartender in town.
Yes, for sure. And it's really interesting because before, yoga was sort of my go-to, right, for my source of helping them, right, which is not a good or a bad thing, but it was really great when I learned to do coaching because now I have such an array of tools to bring to them. And it always fascinates me, no matter what they come to me with, I can basically help them, right?
Yeah.
I have all these tools that I can use to help them. And that was really not only rewarding as a human, right, but rewarding and to see and to watch their evolution because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really tough when you're someone who's in the helping professions and there's somebody that you can't help, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct, right.
Yeah. And so one of the things I've noticed as I've been doing coaching now for a bunch of years. And one of the things I've noticed when I go see certain practitioners, whether it's a yoga instructor or a massage therapist or acupuncture or a chiropractor, is other experts who are not SBMC people are really leaning in on their expertise. And so there's a lot of advice giving. I've been really keen on watching this for myself when I interact with practitioners, because now that I don't really love to receive advice as much as I really love it when people help me tap into my own intuition. So I'm curious for you and your experience, did you feel like before you were a coach that you were leaning in more on advice giving?
Oh, for sure. And I feel that now, like you just said, actually, that I feel like I can step out of the way more now and not be as, concerned about whether I'm going to do the right thing or not for them, because I know when I come from the standpoint of like what's in the best interest of them and not from the standpoint of like what yoga pose could I do or what type of yoga should I do with these people. When I step out and ask questions and start to really delve into what their desires and their needs are, then I can help them no matter what.
No matter what, absolutely. One of the things I think that's interesting about yoga class is when I go to yoga class, I have an experience that I may not be having most of the time in my life. And I hear people say, I got to get to yoga class so I can de-stress. I want to go to yoga class. So I have this moment in my week. It's my hour, and so we go to yoga and we have this experience that a lot of people don't know how to take with them throughout their week or throughout their month or whatever. So they only get it in yoga class. And one of the reason I'm bringing it up is now that you're a coach, I'm sure that you can facilitate helping people to experience that more often and to deconstruct the patterns that disallow them from feeling that more often. But I also bring it up because I think from a standpoint of how we feel in our bodies, I'm not a yoga instructor, so I don't know, but I would imagine that it feels incredibly empowering to be able to have tools like cross mapping where we can help people to experience different sensory qualities in their body and then help them choose to help them to experience what they experience in a yoga class more often. Do you find that?
Oh, for sure. And the interesting part about what you're saying is I remember in a class, everyone was in Shavasana, which is lying down. It was actually the beginning of the class. It's usually a posture that we do at the end. And I was guided to, do a cross mapping with them. And so I took this whole class through it. And it was so fascinating to watch how you could, even though they were just relaxing in the beginning of the class, that you could see people just really melt and see people shifting and changing. And a woman came up to me after class and she had just had surgery on her jaw, on her tooth. And she expressed to me that that was so profound, like she'd never experienced before. And it helped her so much because it gave her the opportunity to get out of pain. The pain that she was experiencing from the surgery that she had. And it wasn't that yoga didn't help her because this was the beginning of the class and she had done the class before, but it was so memorable to her. And she knew now that she could use that for herself.
Right. Yeah, it's something
really amazing.
It's something that helps people to become so much more independent, right?
Yeah.
And like you said, like they can take it with them.
Mm-hmm.
So what are your opinions about from a motivational standpoint, if we're locked up and stressed in our body, do you find that people are as motivated, productive, clear, empowered in their lives when they're stressed and constricted?
No, I would say no. Although I do know that, right, some people, and I know that you all speak about this too, you and Brian speak about this, that sometimes, fear, right, or stress can motivate us. Mm-hmm. But I think one of the things that's most important about saying that is that going back to what you were just saying is that usually we're not clear. Right. So we might be motivated by, fight, flight, or freeze, right, to just go and do something. And then afterwards, you're like, oh, like I did need to do that, but I really didn't do that as well as I could have.
Right.
Or yeah. In a decision or an aligned decision that's really best for you because it was coming from fear as opposed to being from a space of being, more calm and centered and more thoughtful, if you will.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm reflecting for myself. As I've watched people who have made decisions from fear or from constriction, usually they have to push through something or they break relationships or they break commitments to themselves or something like that because the blinders are on, right? And it's like a train full force ahead. to motivate and move themselves towards change and transformation. It's been my experience that holistic, meaning like whole life transformation, happens when we are more relaxed, meaning we're not in a stress state in our nervous system.
Mhm.
Do you find
Oh,
that?
oh, for sure. Yes. And I see that a lot with my clients too. It's like I see a lot of resistance sometimes, right? When they're coming up against something and they don't know what to do or how to deal with it. And then, we'll go through cross mapping and all of a sudden they just totally change, right? And now they're like, that authentic self is the way I sort of like to look at it. And, just recently I was in a session with a client and that was happening. Like there was this resistance and she was like not really willing to kind of look at the whole picture. And then when we did the cross mapping and she realized it, she was like, oh, and it all became, it was like all these light bulbs went on. And she was like, oh, and then I shared, can you feel the difference? And she was like, oh yeah, it's like day and night. And I said, yeah, exactly. It's so amazing. And I could feel and see your resistance. And now it's like you just totally switched and like now you're a different person. And she's
Go ahead. What were you going to say?
no, and she was like, it was one of those moments where, we have these moments in our lives, right, where we're like, wow, that's really cool. But it was a monumental moment for her. Like it was the first time that she had done cross mapping and it worked on her own.
Right.
And it's not like she had never done cross mapping before because I've been working with her for about 4 or 5 months now. And here we are in a session together and she's doing the same thing she's been doing on her own and very successfully. But still the subconscious is so, strong and powerful that she was like, didn't know that was happening. She didn't know it was happening until we got through it. And then she was like, oh yeah, now, wow. It was really amazing to watch.
It is really amazing to watch, like you were saying, the subconscious hoodwinks us and fools us. So when you were saying resistance, I think resistance is like the thing that stands in the way of motivation. And so, I thought authentic motivation, I would say it stands in the way of that inauthentic kind of push through motivation too is resistance, but plenty of books have been written and people say just push through resistance. We have a different way about it. But what I'm curious to ask you about is how did you know she was in resistance? What were the signs that you saw or felt or heard or whatever that you knew that she was resisting her authentic expression?
Well, there was many actually, there was many physical things that were happening. She was constricted in her body and she wasn't able to sort of directly look at me, which is sort of not like her. And her head was sort of down and you could tell that she was just really living in this pattern, right? This pattern of however, however you would explain that. Or how she would explain it, right? It might be fear, or it was, I mean, I call it resistant because she was just like not going to go forward, right? She was just like, I'm going to stay here and this is how I am. And it was almost sort of like she was almost sunken in, as opposed to being the way she normally would be sitting and openly talking with me. So there was a lot of physical, her tone and voice even changed. So a lot of her demeanors changed.
Hmm. So have you ever had somebody who was in resistance and you just verbally called them out on it? I have, and it doesn't tend to go very well because people don't like to hear, like most of the time people get defensive in some capacity. And so that was like a coaching fail on my part to do that. Have you ever had that experience where you just call somebody verbally out, like you're in resistance right now? I'm just curious.
Not so much with clients per se. I do it a lot with my kids. Really, and that's like a subconscious pattern of my own that I don't even know I'm really doing it until afterwards, and I get resistance from them. I'm like, oh, that's right, that doesn't really work, And I'm still being reminded of that even recently, like within this last week. So yeah, it's really interesting. But I haven't done it so much with clients. I have actually once via text with a client and there was no response for like days. So I was like, oh, I don't think that really worked. And, I did it in a kind of loving and caring way, but it just doesn't work. Like you said, it just doesn't really work.
Do you think being a coach has helped you be a better mom?
Oh my gosh, by far. Yeah. I don't, when I first started learning about coaching, I was and started the process, I was so confused because it was so opposite of the way I've always lived my life. And so it was very confusing to me. And I was sort of messing up more as a mom because I was like, not sure what the heck was going on. I was very confused. And as I, finished the program and learned more and more and started to practice more and more, I was changing so much of my own subconscious patterning that, at first my kids were like, who is she? Like, who's that? And they didn't really almost recognize me, at first. And now I feel like there's a really nice flow between us, and there's a lot more compassion, I think, and respect. I think there's a lot of compassion and respect that wasn't there before. And that was because I was so rigid, I didn't realize it, but that was my subconscious patterning. And controlling, which kind of goes along with the rigid.
Sure. That's one of the things that I noticed with our SBMC grads is their life gets better holistically. They enter in because they want to learn a tool for their clients. They want to have a bigger or better business, and the side effects are tremendous growth in, I'm just thinking through people, like every single person has tremendous growth in their personal relationships as well. And, it's just making me kind of like, not really, I'll laugh a little bit, but also like I'm actually a little bit angry about it. We see these drug commercials on television, in magazines now, right? And each one of them comes with a full page or 30 seconds of side effects that are just crummy. And so SBMC we're actually certified with the American Drug List Practitioners Association. So all of us SBMC people, coaches, are drugless practitioners, and the side effects of using SBMC are always really positive. So that makes me just thrilled to hear that about you. And I'm sure you've seen that with your clients. So let's get into some of these stories, because I really want to get into especially this sleep story that we're going to hear from you in case study. Before we do, what's that, Anne?
I was just going to say, can I share something about that?
Yes, please, of course.
So I have a client who has shared with me a few sessions ago that, she's been told by a therapist that she has, PTSD, and that she's been, sort of diagnosed with ADD. And so, I was sort of listening to her, and we were sharing it, and because of that, it's kind of changed her whole outlook of like herself, and also her son. So she has a 6-year-old son who also has been told he's got ADD. And no discredit to any of that. I've never been tested for ADD, but I've thought all of my life I have had it. And through doing the coaching, it's like, well, what's my belief? Because we talk about beliefs, and I started to think about it, and I started to cross map and use, like, even today when I was preparing, I have a presentation after this, and I had this stress in my body, and I was like, it was telling me that I wasn't smart enough or good enough to do this. And so that was my belief. And so I cross map it and came into a space of like, I do know, and I can do this. And so I was just saying to my client, and I said, isn't that just really a belief? Like, I'm not discrediting that you've had stress in your life. We all have. And I respect that, your practitioner shared that with you. But I think a lot of times that we get into these belief systems, and that's who we think that we are. And what if not? What if you're really not? I've been like, and I shared with her, I've thought for my whole life that I had that, but never diagnosed. So here I am going around thinking that's my problem. But maybe it's really not. Maybe it's just if I think about and shift the way that I look at things, that it's really not that. And it takes you out of that confusion, because confusion's always been a big thing or a big issue for me. And just doing those things and cross mapping those has shifted things immensely for me.
Dramatically, right? Yeah.
And she was like, and her eyes lit up because she really didn't want to believe that. It was so powerful. I know I keep saying it was powerful and amazing, but it really was. You could see her whole demeanor shift. Like, wow, really? because I had already talked to her about the choosing and like, which way are you going? Are you going to choose to go this way because that's what your belief is? Or are you going to choose to go this way because this is really what you want? So it was really, really, really amazing to see.
It is
People
amazing, and it
we
is
have that hope.
powerful. Yeah, and we give people hope. Yeah, yeah. SBMC techniques give people miracle-like results.
Mhm.
That is one of the biggest things that we hear from our practitioners is it's a miracle. Like it's SVMC. It's a process that works. And so, that's what we say to practitioners who are like, I wish I could give my clients like that amazing light bulb moment. You can when you know SVMC. Anyway, I sound like a commercial. I loved your thing. I was reading a reputable article. I don't remember where it was, and I don't want to misquote it recently, that was written by a therapist who was saying that they are finding, and I think this is hilarious because I've literally been talking about it for 20 years, but whatever. They're finding that ADD and there was another diagnosis like it, that we shouldn't be labeling them as mental health or mental health issues anymore. And we should not be giving people labels because, and guess what they're finding? It's perceptual patterning.
Mm-hmm.
It's perceptual patterning, and labeling people is doing them an injustice.
Absolutely.
Just like you were talking about, right? So that article, even though I'm being cheeky and also a little bit frustrated because I literally have been saying this for 20 years, but it makes me really hopeful that we're at a time in our human development where we're becoming aware of such things, and it's becoming more really more mainstream to be able to say things like we shouldn't be labeling people when really when we work on their underlying patterns, they have the capacity to change. People have the capacity to change well beyond we give them credit for most of the time, specifically in our healthcare system. So let's talk a little bit about cross mapping. And before we talk about your case study, I just want to frame the conversation for somebody who doesn't know what cross mapping is, who is listening to the recording here. So cross mapping is a method that we can use to help a person basically to embody, to integrate a sensory experience, an emotional experience, a painful experience that they don't like. And so we can't talk our way out of painful, negative emotions or physical pain, chronic pain things in a way that is sustainable. But what we can do is we can work with the perceived symptomology, because even chronic pain is very highly perceptual. Negative emotional experiences are very highly perceptual. And what we do is we work with the client's intuition and the client's perceived reality around their pain or emotional discomfort. The client's perceived reality and the client's perception of what is possible within the body-mind system that they have not had an awareness of yet before cross-mapping. So we'll have them identify how they're feeling in their body. We'll have the client identify what the opposite might feel like. And then we'll have the client find the opposite experience within their body. And what's really profound about that, well, two things, is number one, almost every time people tell me I wasn't aware I had another option for how I could feel. So that's really cool. And the second thing is when we bring up that you have I just gave it away. You have a choice. Once they have a different experience in their body, they realize they have choice. So cross mapping is not about helping somebody to feel different. It's not about making somebody feel different. It's not about making a negative experience go away, but it is about giving them a choice as to whether they would like to feel differently. So with that in mind about cross mapping, Anne, would you introduce us to this case study where your client was having some difficulty sleeping, and let us know kind of a background of what it was looking like for the client? And I'm specifically interested in how you got to a sensory experience around this.
Sure. So the client came to me initially for anxiety. That was the biggest challenge that she was having. So we started to work together, and we did a pattern deconstruction and a pattern reconstruction, and we learned a lot from that. And that's what you're kind of talking about too, right? Is that then she learned she had a choice and such and so on and so forth. And um, we Vox her back and forth. It's sort of like talk texting. And she had sent me a Voxer message and said, hey, can you help me with sleeping? And I was sort of shocked, right? Because I hadn't worked with anybody yet with sleeping. And I was like, no, I don't even really know. And so I thought to myself, and then I said, well, why not? I'm going to give it a shot. So um, I responded back to her, and then we got on a call and we started talking about it. And anxiety was showing up for her. Overall like a visceral experience of, tightness and tension, but it was really this big, it was also spinning, like spinning in the mind, right? Which is something I actually experienced too, where, you're not in your body as much, right? And your mind's just going and going and going, which happens to actually a lot of people. And because of that, right, spinning or spiraling of the mind, then we get confused, right? And then we don't really know what to do. And so these are some of the things that she was experiencing and we had been working on. And she explained to me that she would, be working sometimes late, and then she would go to bed, and then her mind would be going. And then she said, but then sometimes she would go to sleep and then she'd wake up and she'd have that happening. And, we determined that it was this hypervigilance that she had, that's what she called it. That's what we called this pattern for her. It was called hypervigilance. And so we dove into it with cross mapping, and then, we shifted it. And, she basically, chose something different. And it was ease was her big thing, is to come out with ease. And then she made a choice from there of how she was going to handle it. And this has happened a few times. And so the first time she had ease, and I think that she was just going to meditate, like to relax. And that was what she was going to do, right? That was the first time that she experienced it. So all was great. And then she was doing good. And then she came back to me and said, oh, I'm having a struggle again. I'm not sure what to do. And she was at her mom's house sleeping there. And it seemed as though the pattern was about sleeping away from home at times. Other times it was also at home, but with a boyfriend. And that was an issue for her. She was feeling, stressed by that, right? So there was this like underlying fear, right, that was behind it all. So anyway, she was at her mom's house and she wasn't able to sleep. So she didn't think of cross mapping, right? She forgot it, right? So part of our subconscious patterning, right, that takes us out of that. And then, so then she explained this to me. This was on Voxer. And so I had said, until the next night, she was fine. Her mother gave her a pillow. But in her mind, right, in her mind, she's like, I can't sleep if I'm outside my house, or if I can't sleep if someone's in my bed with me. So this was her kind of underlying pattern. On top of, there was another one underlying that of fear, which came out a little bit later. So I explained to her that, because she slept the second night, so, via Voxer, I said, well, you actually did sleep the second night. So it sounds like you were just uncomfortable, right? So that's not that you can't sleep at your mother's house, right? So she was like, oh, it was like one of those light bulb moments. Well, then she had it again where she was with her boyfriend and she felt like she couldn't fall asleep. And she again forgot to cross map. So then the next time we chatted, I explained to her, try to cross map it. So she did. And then she started to realize that she was really in charge of this, and that she could make decisions, or a choice, I should say, that she could make a choice in that moment to do what she needed to do, whether it was, one of them was to actually kiss him. When she was with the boyfriend, her intuition, so going towards like what you were saying, is that her intuition would tell her to kiss him, and they had talked about it, and he was of course fine with that. And then it came up again. She had gotten through that, ended up sleeping, and it came up again. And this is, what happens, right, with our subconscious patterning at times. It's very stubborn, and it like hoodwinks us, like you said. And sometimes it can derail us, right, because we're so in it that we don't even see it. And, hence that's why we don't cross map. So then I explained to her again, that's okay, because she was kind of beating herself up about it. And I explained to her that, it's okay, that happens. It happens to me still, and I've been doing this for a long time. And so she was starting to feel ease with herself even more, right? That like, oh, okay, I don't have to beat myself up about this. I'm going to sort of learn to go with the flow. And then it came up that what was happening is that she was still in one of our sessions, she was still focusing. Like, so in other words, if we look at like, choosing this way or choosing that way, she was still focusing like, I'm not really a good sleeper. I can't sleep. And then she would get, so I didn't think I mentioned it, but she would spiral. So spiraling was the big, sort of red flag, if you will. So when we kind of dissected it a little bit more, she started to realize that spiraling was what was taking her really off track, and that the focus was then always that. And it was the focus of the spiraling that she would be stuck in. So she decided that she was going to choose something else, so that when the spiraling came, that her choice was going to be to focus on like what was good that day, all of the good and happy things that happened, as opposed to the thoughts that would get her into this hypervigilant space of not being at ease and feeling freedom and being able to make a choice. So I know it's kind of a long story, but it really just came down to that she was focused on the hypervigilance still, right? And now because of that, she had such a breakthrough on that last time. I mean, she did each time, it's sort of like we take baby steps and then all of a sudden we take a big leap and you're like, wow, it kind of blows your mind. And so this last one like really blew her mind. And then we just finished doing her soul's agenda. And so now she realized at even like deeper levels of, because now she can choose, hers is to be free, which is like really big for her and big in the sense of the awareness of it. And so now she's using free as an addition to ease when she's making her choices. So it's just amazing to watch.
Wow, that's such a powerful story. And there were so many things that I heard that I would have questions about or would love to know more information about, or just want to highlight. Like one of the things that it sounds like you really did was helped her to understand different aspects of her pattern, like the spiraling, right? Like that was something that she could do something about, but she wasn't even aware of the fact it was happening. It sounds like at
Yeah.
first.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. It was kind of interesting when she had the realization, right, through questioning, that she had this realization that she was like, oh, yeah, that takes me into spiraling and it takes me into spinning. And then it's these thoughts of that, right, that would sort of take her down this rabbit hole of, staying over here in that hypervigilance space. So when she realized that, it's huge. I mean, she notices it even like in her workday now, like when she gets, worked up, if you will, about something that's happening, like even in her day to day, as opposed to just, sleeping, because it generally usually happens with more than one thing in our life when we have these patterns, obviously, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They show up in different areas and we don't even recognize that they're showing up in different areas. So it's neat because she, as the client, was asking you, hey, can you help with sleep? And I loved that. So let me finish that thought train before I get on the other one. She was recognizing something specific that she wanted to work on, and you said yes and worked with specificity on this thing that then she realized was impacting all kinds of different areas of her life. That's really powerful, I think, to be able to leap into whatever area of specificity that our clients bring to us. Now, I say that, and you said, she said, can you help me with X? And you're like, I don't know, right? So what was it that allowed you the confidence and the clarity to be able to say yes when you weren't sure, or you had never done that before?
Well, because if you work the process works. it was sort of what was back in the back of my mind. I was out for a walk one day listening to her Voxer, and I said, well, the process works. Why don't I just try working it? And um, and I figured if not, then then she has options, right? Or I would give her options of what she could do. But I certainly wouldn't want someone to try to go on, to therapy. Not that therapy is bad or anything, but to do something else or to go on some kind of med and not try something that's so simple, and it empowers them, right? And it gives them their own sense of worthiness and I can do this. And because a lot of times I neglected this too, is to say this, is that a lot of times she would rely on her boyfriend, who is now her fiance, by the way. She would rely on her boyfriend to find that comfort and that ease. And I didn't want to say anything, right? Because I was guys, I wanted so badly for her to figure it out on her own. And so I just let her kind of keep going through the process. And she's a great client because, and I say this because I didn't do this all that well in the beginning for myself, is she took the process, she learned the process, and she started doing it right away. Mm. And, I think that really helped her, because I think that's a lot of times what kind of stops someone is they forget, right? And then they don't do it. I mean, that happened to me so much. And then you're wondering what's happening and why is my world not changing? And so she just kept rinsing and repeating, which is so profound. And she actually inspired me to do the same thing, because I was having struggles with sleeping. I was doing a cleanse and I was having a struggle with sleeping. And I was like, oh no, not this again. And I cross mapped it. And before I could even finish cross mapping, I fell asleep. And I woke up in the morning and I sort of laughed to myself, and I was like, oh, thank you to my client, because she helped me, right? Because I had my own pattern going on. It was so amazing.
That is the wonderful way that it works with us as coaches. It's one of the reasons why I love coaching as opposed to therapeutics. And I have a history of being an occupational therapist, but the coaching relationship has this wonderful capacity for us to be in a mutual growth or mutual evolution relationship. And I love that. And you said something that has literally just shattered a light bulb over my head. I'm so excited to have this realization. Oftentimes we talk about how great SBMC methods work and cross mapping works. And we'll say things like, it's great for if you're trying to get your clients to eat kale and be healthy and they won't eat kale, or they know they need to exercise, but they won't go exercise. But it really, really cued me in listening to you. One of the most amazing things about why that's important. So if somebody comes to a coach or a practitioner, a fitness instructor, whatever, and wants to lose weight, and the fitness instructor knows they have to exercise and the client knows that they have to exercise, but the client can't get them motivate themselves, right? Or get themselves to exercise. Actually, what you're doing, or what you did, was you said, I'm using this example and kind of putting you in the middle of it, don't worry about it. We're not going to exercise. We're going to cross map. And when you do that, the person's successful, and that makes so much difference. I was just on a conversation with a client of ours and a coach that works with us. And she said, this program was the first time that I was successful. I was always the one in the programs where I wasn't the successful one at the end, but in this program, I was the one that's successful. And I know that I can go into a program now and be the successful one. And that's what we're doing. That's how we can motivate people. The person who sees that they have success with cross mapping, who sees that they have choice in their body to see that they can feel a different way, all of a sudden will actually naturally gravitate towards healthy things, like more healthy eating, like they'll fall asleep, like they'll go ahead and exercise, because they'll be able to find and navigate through that emotional experience. But it's not that we're making them exercise, for example. So thanks for highlighting that for me, because that was, I had my own little epiphany. Thank you for that.
Can I just share something
Yeah,
with that? So, not only are they obviously empowered and they're able to do it themselves and they feel successful, it's even, in my opinion, it's even more cool to see somebody on the outside knowing that they're in this, relationship with a coach, and that they're, trying to do whatever they're trying to do, whatever their goal is. So one time she has a celebration journal, this particular client, and she has a celebration journal. And she was sharing with me that that her boyfriend has shared with her that he could see the changes that were happening. And it was changing their relationship. And I was so blown away by it. Like I was sort of speechless when she told me this would happen to be on a Voxer when she shared it with me. And then when we had our session together, we talked about it. And I said, you know, that is so profound. Like to know that your life, not only your life is changing, but your relationship is changing, and that he saw it. Like that's just, I mean, it's sort of like with my kids when I was sharing earlier, like they noticed something was different, but they couldn't necessarily figure out what it was. You know, it's so cool to see that and live that, right? Live that, experience that.
Yeah, and take ourselves out of the codependence of relationships where we need each other to be okay. Just like, I'm glad you brought that story back, because it's another thing that I really wanted to say that I heard was that she had thought maybe she needed to rely on her boyfriend for ease, and now she can
Right.
rely on herself. Her boyfriend sees it, and all of a sudden their relationship can deepen because they don't have those codependency kind of, you know, webs that are being woven. And it was through very simple methodology from you. It was through trusting the process to lean on and saying yes, and being confident in yourself, or trusting yourself that that you could do it, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Well, when she first started, you know, doing the process on it, you know, when it wasn't pertaining to sleep, and I was just seeing it, of course, working and working, right? And, you know, not that I haven't before, but, you know, when you always, when you have, I feel like when you have a new client, you know, there's things are just different, right? It's somebody new, it's somebody different. You don't know what they're going to do. You don't know if they're going to work the process, you know, and so there's always like that question a little bit, if they're going to be able to do it successfully, if they're working the process. And at one point, and let me backtrack about that too, because at one point she was struggling a little bit. And I said, oh, you need to make the choice. You have to make the choice at that point. And she had kind of forgotten that. And that obviously shifted everything for her too, because now she's at the point where she's like, oh yeah, the choice is the big part, right? And so that was one of the things that was really important that she, you know, brought into it, of course, because it's part of the process. But I kind of lost my thought on that. What was I saying? How about she? Sorry, totally forgetting
No, that's okay.
the process and forgot. What was it that you said before? I'm sorry. You were talking about.
And I'm on to my own thought, because
Sure.
it's really remarkable. Like we said, miracles, right?
Mm,
Like sleep really can be the kind of thing that people don't think that they can do anything about unless there are substances, whether it's drugs or whether it's natural substances. If to
mhm.
take my rescue remedy, I need to smell the lavender. And by the way, I like to smell lavender and I like rescue remedy, don't get me wrong. Um, but there's still like a reliance on these external things or things outside of myself. If I'm at my mother's house and I forgot my lavender or whatever, like, or my melatonin, all of a sudden I can't sleep, or, you know, so what you've done is helped her to unravel patterns associated with why she wasn't sleeping well. And it's such a remarkable conversation to be having, because sleep is one of those things that we, like I said, we think we can't get around it. It's just the way it is. And
Oh,
you've proven that it's has something to do with something else. It has something to do with our patterns. We can actually empower ourselves to do something about that.
right. And I think that, you know, because I've had struggles with sleep actually my whole life, you know, and so it's sort of like a light bulb, right? Like, oh, well, you've had it all your life. So what pattern is it that's happening? You know, for me, it was really mostly about safety. Um, so, you know, I do things now to put myself at ease and put myself in a safe space when I go to bed. You know, I like lock my door. You know, I do whatever I need to. Sometimes I don't because my dog's with me and she'll bark all night if I don't let her in my. But you know, so you can set yourself up for success, right? When you know what your patterns are and you know what's sort of driving them, and
Yes.
then you can find a different way to live. I mean, to know, I can't believe how long I lived that way, not knowing, not knowing. I mean, this is profound for people. It is, you say it's like life changing. I mean, and that's almost like almost an understatement to really say it. It is, it's more than the magical. It is, I don't even know how else to say it, honestly. It's just so, it's like I don't know, it is a miracle for sure. But I don't know, I wish I could think of another word that describes it that's more profound, right? That's more like highlighting of how much this helps people.
So does it give you more energy being able to do that with people? Because I find that for myself, like this is
Oh,
like a
for sure.
life-giving kind of, it just creates vitality for everyone. Have you found that?
Oh, for sure. It gives me life, it gives them life too, right? Because it's like a mirror, right? It's like all of a sudden their life changes and you're like, and it's not even about me, right? It's not about us. Like, oh wow, look at what I did. I'm just so happy for them that they're able to live in a more happier, free, ease space, feeling more empowered or feeling more whole or feeling more free, if they've done their soul's agenda, it's just adds even that much more to it. Yeah, it's really profound.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing this story with us. I just gleaned all kinds of insights from it. And I'm sure that the people watching on the recording will. We're going to turn off the recording now and have a conversation with our live audience. But before we do, Anne, please tell everybody how they can find you.
You can find me on my website at shineyourlighthealingandyoga.com.
Awesome. And thank you. I really appreciate it today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.